So the Playhouse was founded in 1929. We've been in our space on Anaheim Street since 1951. Our mission is to celebrate the human experience while encouraging the participation of artists and audience alike. Well, I think the Long Beach Playhouse is unique in a couple of different ways. We are a true community theater of Long Beach. You know, we have volunteers on our stages, and we do our art for our community. And since we have two separate stages, we get to do a lot of different types of theater: comedies, dramas, musicals, classics, new works, edgier contemporary stories. So we get to hit all of the different types of theater throughout the year. So we get to be we get to hit every audience and at least one show out of the year everybody's gonna like. With our studio season, we have 5 shows a year, and that only takes up from April through about mid-November. Then the rest of the year, we're able to use our studio space to do the collaborative series. So our artistic director will get applications from outside theater groups or individual artists that don't necessarily have their own space to perform, and they get to bring their show to an established theater. They produce the work, we present the work, and then we get to expose our audiences to new types of theater they may not normally see, and then the outside theater companies get to have the legitimacy of working with a long-standing theater. So we've gotten to work with lots of different types of groups and have had full-out musicals up on our stages, a one-man show, a dance troupe, a comedy show. So we get to have an eclectic experience throughout the collaborative series. So our New Works Festival, I think, is very important because in its name, it's New Works. With our regular seasons, we always do established productions that have a following or have won some awards of some sort to get the audiences in. So with the New Works Festival, we're able to expose our audience to something brand new, something that has never been performed before, and that's always exciting to have our audiences see something brand new and depending on, what the story is about, learn something, cry about something, laugh about something. So I think it's very important for our audiences to see something that is brand new that has never been done before. We're hoping to get a lot more local submissions. We want to have a California or a Southern California winner for the festival, along with someone from somewhere else in the United States. But we think that since we are a community theater, we should be representing our community along with, in this area, with the New Works Festival, having a local person that we get to expose to our community and to share their talents and share their work.
Hello, I'm Simon Bowler, the author of Judgment of the Eye. If you'd like to hear a bit more about the play, continue with this conversation.
My first question is, when did you fall in love with theater and why did you have to be part of the theater world?
Good question. 2 things. My father's an actor, so it was sort of a natural. He was doing television mainly. But then I had an English teacher when I was 13 who fired me on Shakespeare and took us to a lot of plays. And once I had that immersion, I was pretty hooked. But then I think the real killer was probably seeing Nicholas Nickleby and a couple of the Greek plays, the Oedipus trilogy, this sort of immersive, grand, operatic theatre. And then when I was 20, I was at film school and I did a documentary about the National Theatre of Greece. We followed from rehearsals in Athens to a production of Oedipus at Epidavros, the largest and oldest amphitheatre in the world. And it was in Greek, but I didn't care. It was incredible. So I think those 3 epic productions, the Greek at the Royal Shakespeare Company, Nicholas Nickleby, and then seeing the Greek in Epidavros was, I love movies, but those epic plays were like a novel and a film and an opera all in one. And that was it. I was hooked.
And from there, when did you fall in love with writing and when did it go from an interest to an obsession?
Well, I diverted into documentaries for about 20 years and wrote and produced the documentaries. Producing a documentary is writing a documentary. And editing a documentary is a kind of writing, just writing with pictures and scenes. But then I burned out a little bit on television. It's highly commercial, highly competitive, and full of wankers. Um, and I wanted to be around people that love what they're doing, not just paid to be there. So COVID happened, and I started delving back through my old screenplays and thought, you know what? Most of what I've written is actually more suited to theatre thematically. And in theatre, you can get depth that, films are plot driven. For me, the best plays, or the plays I like, not the best plays, the plays I like are theme driven. So, does Oedipus have a lot of character? Somewhat. But are the themes huge and immersive? Yes. Big questions, big answers, and big playing through of these things like fate. And then, of course, Trump came in, and that really fired me up, because I sort of somehow had to process all this bullshit, and feeding back through my plays the sort of whole sense of false narrative, cognitive dissonance, I think gave me a reason to make these suddenly relevant and contemporary, and they needed to be done. And then, the more I did it, the better I got, and the better I got, the more I liked it, and the more I liked it, the more I did it, and the more I did it, the more I liked it. And now that's all I bloody do.
When did you hear about the Long Beach Playhouse New Works Festival, and why did you want to be part of it?
The American landscape of theatre has, being a big country, has hundreds of middle-sized and smaller theatres. It's a perfect place for someone like me who's trying to take rather big plays, rather ambitious plays, and step them up and workshop them, hopefully one day to get them on a slightly bigger stage, as they're fairly ambitious plays. And so of those hundreds of theatres, a handful do this play development. And Long Beach seemed to be, well, it's local, so that helps. And the idea that they would do a staged reading is great, because then I can hear it, develop it, network it, and see what works and what doesn't. And to be frank, they're on the lists. They're on the playwriting contest lists.
The theater experience, why is it so important both for the audience and the actors?
Well, it's the community, for a start, live community. But as I said, I think I probably diverged from modern theatre, meaning 1950s onwards, which, not to be too disparaging, because I love Stoppard and I love Arthur Miller and I love Edward Albee and all of them. But there's a little bit, for my taste, too much of a couple around a dinner table, and then in Act 3, you discover they had a dead baby. And they're highly character driven. But they don't seem to tackle the big issues of the day, for me. Now, obviously, there's room for that, but I find that when plays have, obviously, character and plot sufficient, but themes, then it's a sort of communal, it's a discussion. It's almost a dialogue, trialogue between the writer, the actors, characters, and the audience. And the meaning comes out of that dialogue. Whereas other mediums, books, films, television, radio, podcasts, they're all fixed. They're a fixed point of view, and you're being told, you become passive. Whereas in theatre, the audience is an active participant and has to imagine. The active imagination makes you a co-author. So the writer says, this is 16th century London, and all it is a desk. But if the actors can conjure it and the audience can imagine it, somewhat like a parent telling their 7-year-old child once upon a time, and the child immediately, so the parent says, once upon a time in a land far, far away, there was a bridge, and under the bridge lived a troll. Any 7-year-old has already filled in the whole world with castles and sky and clouds and green fields, and that participation makes them a sort of co-author or vested in it. No, more than vested. And I think theatre does that. I think it pulls the audience in and asks them to be a active participant. So I call it active watching as opposed to passive watching, which I think is pretty much everything else. I mean, it's no accident that it came out of religious ritual. And I still think it is a religious ritual. I mean, you used to sacrifice a lamb. Well, originally you'd sacrifice a person, then you'd sacrifice a lamb instead of the person. And now we pretend to kill an actor. But it's essentially the same religious ritual as it always was, I think.
I have this down, but many playwrights say their theater is their church. Would you say in many ways theater is your other church?
No, nature's my church. Theatre's my playground. It's where toddlers, that's why they're called plays, because adults get to be 3-year-olds and just mess around on a stage and play like a playpen. That's why they're called plays.
Where did the story idea come from for Judgment of the Eye, and why did you have to write it?
The idea came from an article, because it's a true story, historical story. I'd been debating with a friend for about 15 years, modern art versus classical art. I'm a classicist, as you can probably tell. And we had a raging debate about the merits of both classical and modern art, contemporary art, modern art. And that led to all kinds of questions about, well, what is art, and is it in the eye of the beholder, and how do you define it, and is it just a fashion? What concepts of beauty are obviously fashionable? So that, and then I read the article about this art forger, and without having to change anything, all these issues were inherent in the story, which is great. That means I can proselytize and preach through the historical facts, so it doesn't look like I'm proselytizing or preaching. I'm just presenting a story that actually happened, but gets the whole idea of cognitive dissonance and prejudice and false narratives without me having to pound the audience with didacticism. And then, as I said, Trump came in, and suddenly what was applicable to art suddenly became applicable to everything. And now it wasn't a history play, now it was a contemporary play set in the past. And now it wasn't an academic issue of what is art, now it was a relevant and vital question of what is truth, and who's making it up, and who believes it, and why. So it became sort of pressing.
Without spoiling it, tell us at least the beginning, and as much as the main story you can tell us.
The story. So the story is a true story of a painter in the 1930s and 40s who was a classicist, but wasn't, and he was very good. He won several awards. He was sort of regarded as one of the better painters in Holland in his style, but his style in the 1920s and 30s was wildly out of fashion. Expressionism had come in, Dadaism, Surrealism, Cubism, and none of the galleries were interested in Rembrandt-like lifelike pictures. So he was sort of shunted aside. He started a newspaper or a magazine about art, trying to extol the golden age of Dutch painting. But it went bankrupt because everybody was interested in something new. Then his friend and colleague, who was an art restorer and sometimes buyer and seller, heard that there was a Franz Hals for sale, but no one had seen the Franz Hals. It was sort of, there was rumor this new Franz Hals Laughing Cavalier was available somewhere. And Theo, his friend and dealer, found a buyer who was interested, who said, if you can find this painting, I would gladly pay good money for it. So he suggested to Han van Meegeren, my hero, you're a classicist, why don't you paint one? So he did. And lo and behold, they sold it. And lo and behold, no one questioned it. And lo and behold, he went from teaching at a girls' school for a fairly low pay and living in a poor part of town with his new wife in a small house. Actually, he had to go and live with his mother-in-law for a while, just like Vermeer did. And suddenly he had a bit of money, so they did a couple more. And then they read an article, or Van Meegeren read an article by Bredius, the #1 Baroque critic in the world, the head of the Rijksmuseum, widely regarded as the leading man in his field and a champion of Vermeer and Caravaggio. A painting had been discovered in London called Martha and Mary in the house of Martha and Mary. And it was discovered to be a lost Vermeer. Everyone was very surprised because Vermeer, the girl with the pearl earring, etc., had never painted a religious painting. And here was one of a Bible story. Bredius was astounded and suddenly realized that there's a 10-year period of Vermeer missing from the biographies. And he surmised that Vermeer probably did the grand tour, Rome and Florence, etc., and surmised that he probably studied, as many artists did, Turner or ever, you do the grand tour and you go and see the great paintings, no internet in those days, surmised that he was probably heavily influenced by Caravaggio. And he surmised that there were probably several, 6, a dozen paintings by Vermeer, probably religious, while he's on his tour of Europe, copying basically and learning from the great masters like Caravaggio. And he said, well, here we found the first one. There's bound to be several others. You wouldn't have just done one in this 10-year period. So my man, Van Meegeren, said, well, why don't I paint the paintings that that Bredius has predicted will be found? They won't be forgeries because they'll be originals. They're not copies. They are new paintings in the style of Vermeer. Van Meegeren didn't say they were Vermeer, and he gave them to Theo to sell to Bredius because they thought if Bredius authenticated them, that's it, he's the last word. They didn't tell Bredius it was Vermeer. They said it might be. I don't know. We found this painting in a barn lost for centuries. Bredius was overcome and cried when he saw it. Said, "Oh my God, this is Vermeer!" But not only is it Vermeer, his theory had suddenly been proven right. So he bought it on behalf of the nation, and it was going to be put. It was put in the National Gallery in Amsterdam. Well, that was very good. They made like $1 million back then. It's like $10 million now, 20. So why not keep doing it? So they did. Van Meegeren, he worked hard. It would take him a year to do one of these paintings and to perfect the techniques and the style and the inspiration of Vermeer. And he ended up doing quite a few. Second World War comes, and now it's in a way easier because no one's questioning anything. People are trying to dump their collapsing money into a stable asset, and people are buying these Vermeers. And Vermeer's star is rising. He's becoming one of the greatest artists of the Baroque period. The Dutch people were invaded and run over in 24 hours. The Nazis rolled in. There was no resistance. They just took over. And they were pretty brutal, as they were everywhere in Holland. Jews, Polish, gypsies, all rounded up. But that gave a little bit of cover for Van Meegeren because no one was questioning anything. So he just kept selling them. And Bredius kept authenticating them. It was a happy arrangement. But the people were very humiliated by the Nazis. And these new paintings that were discovered were a source of national pride. They even had an exhibition, Grand Masters of European Art, and Van Meegeren's Vermeers were displayed as the central crowning paintings of 500 years of European art. In fact, 40,000 people went to see his paintings, and people were so reverent, they put carpets in front of the paintings so people could worship in silence before these paintings. End of the war comes, and the Dutch resistance have been tagging Van Meegeren, who is now the richest artist in human history. He owns 60 buildings in Amsterdam, including hotels. He's so rich, he had an ice rink built into his basement just for a New Year's Eve party. He had money stuffed in the walls, in the garden, in the floorboards, everywhere in the attic, because he couldn't account for all this money. He kept telling people he'd won the lotto. Anyway, the resistance were very suspicious where all this money was. Even though he was hiding it, it was still obvious he was wealthy. And they'd seen him collaborating with Nazis. So they put him on trial as a collaborator. And they said, we're going to kill you. You will die for selling national treasure to the enemy. And he said, no, you don't understand. That's not what happened. Of course, they said he would say anything to get from being hung. And he said, well, give me 6 weeks and I'll paint a new one. I painted them. And they laughed at him. And he said, no, I painted them. There's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 of them. I painted all of them. Now, all the paintings have been verified at this point by the National Gallery in London, the Met in New York, and the Rijks in the greatest experts in the world had verified all of these paintings. But for some reason, the judge said, okay, we'll give you 6 weeks under house arrest, paint a new one. So he did. And sure enough, they analyzed it and they looked at it and whatever, and they saw it as the same techniques as used in the other paintings. And he went from being a hero, a villain who had collaborated, to being a hero because Goering had tried to buy several of these paintings and had actually bought one. And now Van Meegeren was a hero because he'd ripped off the Nazis. When Goering, under arrest in Nuremberg, found out that his prized painting, Supper at Emmaus and Christ with the Scribes by Vermeer, were false, apparently he got sick and a few days later committed suicide. Van Meegeren was given 1 year for fraud, not forgery, because they weren't forgeries, but fraud for defrauding people of money. And he was put under house arrest, but before the sentence began, he died of a heart attack. And that's a story you couldn't make up.
What would you say the themes are for your play?
It's really the original title was called Forger, because it's about a forger. But when we did some Zoom readings and feedback from the play, people were thinking this is a historical play about a forger. But as I said earlier, it's not, in my mind, a play about forgery. It's a play about false narratives and how easily it could be the Bible we're talking about. It could be a political doctrine we're talking about. So I would say the themes are cognitive dissonance, mass hysterical belief, and also the way we construct truth and beauty. It's not out there, it's in our heads, the kind of lens we look through. So I changed the title to Judgment of the Eye, which is a quote from Twelfth Night, Shakespeare, to try and steer the audience and reader away from this being about forgery to about being how we judge.
And to add to that, what do you want the audience to get out of this play?
Well, it should be entertaining. Hopefully it's fun, it moves, the characters are engaging, complicated, flawed, it's funny. So it should be I think it's engaging. I think it's amusing. And on various readings we've done before, the audience has laughed a lot and cried. Even the actors cried on the last production. But most importantly, it made them think and question. And so I would hope you'd come out of this play questioning everything you believe. If you believe in God, question it again. If you believe in democracy, question it again. If you believe that history is the way it is laid out, question it again. And if you believe that Rembrandt's the greatest painter, question, do you believe that or were you told that? So hopefully it provokes as well as entertains.
Why must or should people go see your play?
Well, it's funny, it's fast, it's brisk, the characters are fantastic. Everybody loves Han. Everybody loves several of the characters. They're devious, they're witty, they're fast, and they're morally compromised. Not bad, but complex. So I think you'll have it's funny, it's engaging, it's moving, it's sad, it's tragic, and ultimately it's, I think, pretty deeply thought-provoking.
So when you're at the Long Beach Playhouse listening to the reading, what are you looking for from yourself, but also from the audience reactions?
I tend to watch the audience as much as I watch the actors. So I tilt my chair and then I write down every time they laugh, I write it down like a scorecard. And so I kind of watch where I can see where they're laughing, how many times they're laughing, how frequently, and I can see how many times they lean forward. And so for me, it's an opportunity to hear the rhythms of the play, but also specifically to see how it's affecting the audience on a sort of minute or second by second basis. And that way I can read, in theory, where it's working or where it's not working.
What are your goals concerning this play? I'm hoping to be fully produced, and where do you hopefully get it put done?
Yes, I'm hoping it'll be fully produced, of course. There was a production in San Antonio at the Overtime Theatre, which is a very small theatre of 50 seats, 45 seats, I think. It played for 6 weeks and sold out every performance, and the audience seemed to love it. So it was a remarkably inventive production, and they managed to make a kind of epic play in this tiny space. But I've written it very sparse, so it could just be black box. As black box, it sort of works because the themes, I think, really stand out. But it's probably more suited to a mid-sized theatre, sort of Kirk Douglas, Cerrito's Performing Arts, that mid-sized theatre, whatever you call that level of theatre. Then I think you could get a little bit into the paintings themselves and the set and make it a bit more lush. And I think you'd really pull people into a world, not just of ideas, but of textures and being there. So that would add to the history and the immersion. So ideally, I think mid-sized theatres, but it seems so far to have played very well in small theatres, partly because it moves along very briskly, so it carries on the words. I think we'll see in the staged reading, it almost works as radio.
I always ask this question because, as you know, whether it's a reading or a full production, the ticket sales don't pay for the production either way. What would you tell the people why they should support their local theaters beyond just buying tickets, but actually in kind or donations? Why is it important to support theater?
Well, it's only worth supporting if you're interested, right? So if it speaks to you, then it's worth something. If it doesn't really speak to you, then it's irrelevant. Some people just love musicals. In fact, 98% of theatre goers seem to only like musicals, so there'd be no point in them supporting works like this. It's out of their realm. But for that 1% or 2% that do, as I said before, it's a kind of an arena of ideas and a communal ritual. And I think it's important, if it's important for you to be provoked and challenged, then you should support theatre, because you're certainly not being challenged on TV or the radio or the newspapers or movies mainly. So it's one of the few areas left where there's a sort of a debate, an argument in the old sense of a rhetorical back and forth. I don't find the painted arts do it. I don't find pop music do it. There's no political pop music anymore. We used to have, John Lennon or The Clash, or now we don't have anyone. So if you want provocative ideas, you want to think, then support small local theatre. If you just want to laugh, if you just want a musical, then you don't have to bother. Don't waste your money.
Is there anything anything else you want to mention about the play that we haven't talked about yet?
I know. I think we've pretty much covered everything. I don't think it matters if you know about Vermeer or art. I've written it so it's user friendly. Doesn't matter if you know anything about World War II or not. It's not about that. That's incidental. It's the wallpaper. It's the background. So I wouldn't be intimidated if you're an audience member by it being about high art or history or Nazis or World War II or even the techniques of forgery. That's all in there and gives it textures and substance and context. But the real thing is a incredibly flawed character who was a morphine addict, the richest artist in history, a brilliant painter, and he wanted to be like Salieri and Amadeus. He wanted nothing more than to be divine, which we all would like in our work to be very good and to be recognized. He did it without recognition. He was anonymous. He just wanted to make something great. And I think we can probably all relate to that. Hello, I'm Simon Bowler. I wrote the play Judgment of the Eye, an enthralling tale of an art forger in the Second World War who was put on trial for forging Vermeers. But it was discovered during the trial that he had painted the paintings himself. He cheated the Nazis and turned from a villain to a hero. He was the richest painter in history. He was a morphine addict. He was a cheat, a swindler, a dandy, but he's also deeply aspirational. All he really wanted to do was create great art. His story is compelling, it's funny, it's tragic, and it's hugely entertaining. And you cannot believe what happens. As you're watching it, you cannot believe this happened, and it all happened. So come, take a look, and I'll see you at the theatre.
I'm Joe Bravaco, the playwright of The One Good Thing, or Are You Patrick Swayze? If you want to learn more about my play, come to the theater.
First question is, when did you first fall in love with theater, and why did you have to be part of the theater world?
Actually, the first time my parents took me to the theater, I fell in love with it. And I was 11 years old, and my brother was 14. And I walked out of that place, and it was like nothing I've ever seen. And it was funny. As much as I loved it, I never wanted to get into the acting. I was fascinated by the movements on stage and the design of everything. And then that led to, when I was in early teens, I started reading a lot of theater, a lot of plays by William Inge, especially. I started with Inge, and then I was precocious and was reading Tennessee Williams. And I said, this is something I would love to do, But it was very early, and I remember I wrote a one-act play when I was, I think, 14 or 15, sophomore year of high school, and I gave it to my English teacher to read, and well, he said he was impressed. Who knows? But he was very nice about it, so that kind of encouraged me.
When did you fall in love with writing, and when did it go from an interest to an obsession?
I would never say my writing was an obsession, because I remember a review I read of a Terrence McNally off-Broadway play when he was first starting out, and their critic in the Times said, Terrence McNally writes plays like other people eat breakfast. And I thought, wow, that's great. To be that prolific. I'm not. I mean, I really have to be hit with something, and which drives me. Or I have to have somebody on top of me saying, let's do this, and I'll write it. I love writing. When I get into writing, I am lost. Nothing can get in the way of it. I will just sit there for hours and write and write and write. I don't eat, which is a great way to diet, but I have but I don't do it enough. Let's put it that way. I don't do it enough. I was a teacher for many years, and I taught drama and I taught writing, and that preoccupied a lot of my time. But I really have to be struck with an idea before I could sit down and write something.
Theater experience, why is it such a unique format, both for the audience and the actors on stage?
Well, the theater experience, for the audience, it's once in a lifetime. You never see the same performance twice, which is why I could see a play 6 or 7 times, but I will not watch a movie more than twice. The movie's always the same. I mean, you can get different things out of a film once you've seen it once you've seen it twice. But I love the idea that when you go to a play, and if there's a replacement cast, it takes on a whole different, not so much meaning, but a perspective. And you really get another look at something that's unique. And I used to tell my students when I taught them, I said, you go to a play, you're there once in a lifetime experience. No one else is going to see that except the other 500 people that you're sitting with, and that's what's wonderful about it. That's just one. I love that. That's the thing I love,
When you heard about the Long Beach Playhouse New Works Festival, why did you want to apply to this festival?
I applied to a few festivals. And, when I see something online, it's this Long Beach Playhouse. I know has a reputation that's quite good, and so I applied. And when I got the non-local winner of the competition, I was absolutely thrilled. I understand that they invite a critic to come in, and that's really an important reason that I was anxious for this one. I want to get some real feedback on it, some professional feedback on it. I haven't had that yet. The play opens, like I said, a production in England in April, and that'll be the first feedback. But this for the reading is really the feedback that I'm kind of interested in seeing what this critic has to say, in addition to what the audience has to say. So it was a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity for get that kind of a reaction. Hopefully it'll be a good reaction, but just to get a reaction.
How do you come up, and what is your process in creating a play?
It's very different. My process of creating plays comes from different ideas. My first thing that I wrote with a collaborator, we saw a film about Doc Holliday in the OK Corral, and we wanted to write a musical version of that story, which we did. So that was a lot of historical research. I wrote a play based on Herman Melville's only comic novel. Again, with my collaborator, who that musical was called Sundown, about Doc Holliday. My collaborator on that, he and I wrote this Israel Potter, which is Herman Melville's only comic novel, and that got some, it got into a couple of regional theaters. But for this play, for The One Good Thing, it was inspired by music. I had been listening to the soundtrack of an Irish film, and I used a song actually at the end of the first act and the end of the second act that inspired the film. Inspired the play. And I do a lot of walking in the morning, and I had my headset on, and I was listening to this over and over, and it just characters came to me out of this, and I was fascinated by the way that I would put different scenes as I was walking in my head, and then come home and write them down, and then I would have to juggle them for the script to make the script work. But it's been a wonderful process. It is the fastest thing I've ever written. The fastest thing.
You launched into my next question. You already answered it. Where did the idea come from? Or do you want to go more detail about that?
Well, I could go a little bit more detail on where the idea came from, although I didn't even know it. It had to be pointed out to me. I was talking to a friend, and I said, this came so quickly. I've never written anything so quickly. And he said to me, because it's so personal. And I said, no, it's not. And then when I thought about it, yeah, it kind of is. There's a lot of personal things in the script, how I feel about certain people and certain things. And so maybe that helped a lot. That it was something in me that I didn't even know was coming out. It started interestingly enough, it started as a one act. I wrote it as a one act. It won a couple of competitions, one in Ireland and a couple in the States. And my sister-in-law said, one act can only go so far. She says, why don't you expand it? And I did, and I've been having some luck with it. So it's been a rather unique experience for me, because the musicals and the Israel Potter play, they took a long time. So this was a rather unique experience.
So tell us the main story arc for the play, The Good One Thing, or Are You Patrick Swayze?
The name, the one good thing is really almost a theme of it. I don't want to give away too much, but one of the characters talks about the one good thing in life that we leave behind. And the subtitle, or Are You Patrick Swayze, is they play a game, they play a movie game. Who am I? And they give out clues, and one of the guesses is, are you Patrick Swayze? Which also ties into what's happening in the play.
I know you don't want to do any spoilers, but can you at least tell us about the beginning of the play, right when it starts?
Sure. It's two brothers in Ireland. They have a small cottage on the cliffs of the Irish Sea. And one morning, one of the brothers tells the other, Jamie tells his brother Tommy, that he's dead and he's a ghost. And that happens about maybe maybe about 10 minutes into the script. And it takes off from there. Is he dead? Is he not dead? And we really don't find out what's going on. The puzzle doesn't come together really until the very end of the play, which is, there's an interesting thing that when I was expanding it, Act One ends with the question, is he dead or not? And I thought, well, maybe that should end the play. And I thought, no, that's kind of a cliche. So Act One still ends with, is he dead or not? And then Act Two begins where you think, well, wait a minute, he's alive. But then you think, or is he? So it goes on a little bit further than that. And I think what it says about grief and forgiveness and redemption, it can touch a lot of people. So far, I've heard great things about how they're moved by it.
What are the overall themes of this play?
Well, it's the themes are really about the eternal. The two brothers find the eternal in their fraternal bond. There's a whole thing about guilt and grief and forgiveness and redemption and love. And the thing about love is one of the brothers feels that he has never been loved. And as a result of that, he is incapable of being loved. He has, his mother has died, and she is the only one that he feels said, I love you, and meant it. His brother has never said it because he's just cold in a certain respect. He has a problem with his father. His sister-in-law says, I love you to everybody, so he doesn't think it means anything. And he had a partner who, cheated on him, and that's over, so he didn't feel any love there. And when you feel that you are unloved or incapable of being loved, it's hard to live with. So that's basically the theme about these two brothers coming together, and with their guilt, with the forgiveness, and with the redemption by the end.
What do you want the audience to get out of your play?
I want them, hopefully, to see something within themselves that they have, like, maybe they haven't said the things that they should say to people that they love. There's a, what can I say? There's a not so much a moral, but we did a reading of this, someone was in tears at the end of it, and said, I was thinking of my brother at this point. We're doing this in, I don't know if you know, we're doing this in England in April, the end of April. And the director, it was very, very moved by it because of a relationship he has with his brother that's kind of similar to the one in the play. So you want them to kind of look at this, maybe see themselves in it, maybe recognize something that they've done wrong and maybe change. It's hard for a lot of people to say, I love you. You could say it very superficially. As the sister-in-law, she's not in the play, but they talk about her, and she says, I love you to everything. Every time she hangs up the phone, instead of saying goodbye, she says, I love you. And one brother asked the other, Jamie, who's not married, asked his brother Tommy, well, does that make you jealous when she says, I love you on the phone? He says, no. And he says, of course not, because she doesn't mean it, So there's a depth to love that maybe, we all don't reach.
As a playwright, when you see this play performed, what are you hoping to get out of it?
Oh, wow. What do I hope to get out of seeing the play performed? Well, I hope to see the audience moved by it. I think that's what I'm really, really want to see. I saw a couple of plays in my lifetime where I could not get out of my seat after they ended. I'm not comparing myself to these plays. These are classic, brilliant plays. But when I first saw Our Town, I couldn't move. First production I saw, Glass Menagerie, could not move. There was a play called, you probably know it, Sam Hunter's A Case for the Existence of God. Brilliant play. Wiped me out. And I'm not comparing myself to that, but I would like maybe just a few people to sit there after it's over and not be able to move because they've been moved by it.
The most important question, why should people go see your play?
Oh boy, why should people see my play? Well, there's always family dynamics that are rough going. You don't have to be two brothers. I mean, there's a lot going on here between the brothers, between the father and the one son. Has a very different relationship to the father and the other son. There's a relationship with the mother that these boys had, which is very different. So there's a lot of family dynamics going on, and I wish that people could, like I said, see themselves in some of these dynamics, and maybe recognize that things can change, and they don't always have to be that way. They change in the play, but perhaps without giving away too much, perhaps it's too late.
Why are readings and festivals like this important, whether it's Long Beach or other places? Why are important to the playwright process?
It's interesting. I did there was a reading at Cape May stage in New Jersey, and I was there, and I saw the reaction of the audience. The audience, nobody, after the reading was over, no one left. They stayed. I heard, it was, like I said, at that time that you could hear a little bit of weeping from somebody who was in the audience. The reaction was very good. And now, sometimes you do want criticism. to see what you've got, what you had. And I did see things that I changed from the reading. So that helped, even though the reaction was good. In fact, when I was leaving the theater, we had the talk back, and it was about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. And then I left the theater maybe about 10 minutes later, and there was a couple waiting outside for me from Chicago who were visiting Cape May, New Jersey. And they stopped me, and they were very, very flattering, not flattering. What's the word I'm looking for? Well, they flattered me about what they had seen. And they said, this is something we're going to remember for a long time. As you said, we were talking about that reaction that you want. That's the kind of reaction that you really want. It's something that's going to be remembered. When they did the reading in England before they're doing this production, I did not go for the reading. They sent me a recording of it. And at the end of the reading, as the lights were going down, you could hear someone in the audience go, "Wow." I mean, again, that reading taught me a few things, but in its imperfect state, and it probably still is in an imperfect state, it was capable of moving one person at least. So readings are important. They are important, especially if I'm not going to be there at Long Beach, but it's probably easier for people to be more truthful when the author is not sitting in front of them.
Well, to add in this, as you know, ticket sales don't cover the production of the play.
Right.
Why is it important for people to support their local theater, not only by buying tickets, but when they can donate and help them in other ways?
It's extreme. I mean, to donate to your local theater is probably one of the best things that you could do with your money. I mean, you've got children or grandchildren, nieces and nephews who should be introduced to theater, and on a local level, it's perfect for them. And on some, in some community theaters, I mean, they can actually get involved. You got to keep theater going. I mean, it's not a cheap proposition, but it's important. It really is. Every play has something to say to somebody. And it should be said, and it should be heard, and there's only one way to do it, and that's by supporting, financial supporting.
Is there anything else about your play that you want to mention I haven't asked about?
Let me think. Anything? Well, I'm about the play, like I mentioned a little bit before, it can be a little obtuse, and I don't mean that in a Beckett way. I mean, what exactly is being happening? Again, I don't want to give away too much, but there's two scenes in the play that you would maybe go back and say, wait a minute, and then at the end of the play, you said, if you're listening, you get it. So what I'm hoping the actors will do, will get the lines that kind of help and let you know what the play is about. They'll get that. So I talked to the director, and she was very open, and we talked about what I would like to see. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this, because they are going to also give me a video of it. So it's going to be really interesting. I don't want to. I don't like when plays tell you exactly what to think, but or how to feel. I like to walk out of the theater debating what really happened, and I hope that's what my play can do.
Would you say this is a play worth seeing a second time, and at the same time bringing additional friends to see it?
Absolutely, you have to see it. Probably not have to, of course, but you should see it a second time. You should see this play a second time, because I think once you go in and you talked about it, and maybe you have two different ideas, you could really zero in. But no, I think you're right. That's a great question. I think it's a play that deserves to be seen a second time. Hi, I'm Joe Bravaco. I am the playwright of The One Good Thing, or are you Patrick Swayze? The play is a 2-act play, could be performed without an intermission. And I think it's a play that is going to have people guessing what's going on a little bit. I think it's a play. I hope it's a play that's going to touch people, maybe have them reflect on their own lives, maybe have them change a little bit. And I hope you'll all come and see it, because I loved writing it, and I would love to have you see it. And I'll see you at the theater.